Hi, I'm Mary Wing Soares, and we're here today for another edition of Agenda Item. With me, as usual, is Tim Thompson, our town planner, and we're here to talk about the June meetings that are upcoming.
We are back to 2 meeting schedule as we have been consistently for the last few months. Our first meeting will be June 1st. At that meeting, the first thing the board will be looking at is, as we begin looking at updating the town's master plan, we're in the process of setting up our master plan steering committee. There's been requests sent out to all the various boards and committees for representation. Part of that is soliciting 3 at-large members of the community to be part of the steering committee. We've received, at this point, 5 people who are interested in serving on the committee, and at that meeting, we'll have the planning board interviewing those positions, those people for those positions,
Right.
and ultimately making a decision on which 3 would be slated for the committee to move forward.
Now, ideally, we wanted somebody from the north, middle, and
Correct.
southern sections of our town. How did the 5 play out,
I
do
believe
you
we're
know?
pretty close.
Yes.
And actually, out of those 5, there might be a couple of those that may actually fit in other slots. One might be a good representative for the business community. Another one potentially could be appointed by the Heritage Commission later this week, so they may actually be appointed otherwise.
Right.
So all 5 may at some point actually end up on the committee. It's just a matter of which slot they actually fill.
How many slots are there on the...
The steering committee is
Steering
14
committee.
members.
14.
It's 1 member each from the planning board, zoning board, town council, school board, conservation commission, heritage commission, all the, basically the boards and commissions that have something to do with land use in general. We've also got a member of the business community, the 3 at-large positions, and a member of the recreation community is also sought for the committee as well.
And we know for the school board, John LaFerrier is going to be the planning board steering committee member, or the school board, but he's also our liaison on the planning board,
Correct.
so he's getting kind of a double education here this
And that's
first time
happened
around.
in the past. And at our 2004 master plan, Art Rugg, who's currently the planning board chairman, was also on the planning board at that time, was the Heritage Commission representative to the steering committee, but also a sitting planning board member. So there were 2 planning board members on the steering committee back in '04,
Right.
and we'll have the same situation again this year with Letha Riley being appointed by the board at the last meeting to be the planning board's representative to the committee.
Right. And then, has the town council appointed anyone yet, do you know?
I don't believe they have. I had asked the town manager about that, and I believe he's going to be making sure it's on their next agenda.
Great. Okay, good. So it's coming together.
Yes.
And I saw an email today, as I'm the alternate, that June, we're looking for 3 dates in June for the first meeting.
Capital Improvements, that's actually the CIP
Oh,
committee.
that's a different committee.
That's the Capital Improvements Planning Committee, which is beginning their work, which will lead into the updated Capital Improvements Plan, which will be probably before the Planning Board for a public hearing around the October timeframe.
Okay.
And you're actually a full member of that committee, because there
Okay.
are 2 Planning Board representatives on that, so
Right.
that would be yourself and Rick. But we're looking to get the first meeting for the CIP committee working. Usually that first meeting is simply a review of our previous year's plan, selecting a chairman and a secretary, and then putting
Right.
together the schedule for when departments and committees put their projects in, so we can start looking at the capital requests for the next 6 years.
Well, thank goodness we have you, Tim, so keep us all straight. But tell me, the first meeting for the steering committee for the master plan, though?
That has
is-
not been scheduled
Okay.
yet. We want to make sure we have the full the full committee compromised, everybody put together.
Right.
We'll then start to, as staff, we're right now looking at putting together a draft of the request for proposals that we'll be putting out for consultants to do the master plan for us. So that committee will then go through the RFP with us, make sure that it's consistent with what the town is looking for. Then they'll also be involved with the review of potential consultants that submit for the RFP, and they'll be involved in the review and interview process to who we ultimately select.
So we're looking middle of June, maybe late June?
It's probably going to be middle of June, maybe early July, depending on how quickly we get the other slots filled on the committee.
All right. So, you know, we've been talking a bunch about Woodmont
Yes.
orchards, and I know that's the first item on the
June 8th meeting.
on the June 8th meeting. But we've also been talking about our town has never planned anything as big as 600 acres, when in fact we've planned 42 square miles in our master plan.
Yes.
And that consists of choosing zoning for certain areas, making recommendations.
Correct. The overall master plan covers the broad range of land use, transportation, infrastructure, utilities, open space, recreation, natural resources, historic and cultural resources. It covers the broad spectrum of community issues. Basically, the two required elements in a master plan are a vision statement and a land use plan.
Right.
Anything beyond that is optional, but as a community, we've always tried to strive for a comprehensive plan that sets forth, the existing conditions, where we are, where we're at, and then ultimately where we want to see ourselves in the future. And it really is a great undertaking. It takes usually at least a year, sometimes a year and a half to get through that whole process. It's an intense process. It's a lot of fun. It's really the best place for residents in the community to help shape the future of the community.
Right, so perhaps, those 5 folks that have already stepped up, thank you, but maybe there'll be a couple of more. Do we have enough time?
The deadline is actually probably going to be after this airs.
Okay.
The 27th of May is the deadline for those interested in at-large to submit their requests.
So just a few more days?
Yes.
All right. And then, speaking of Woodmont,
yes,
we have our discussion, the second meeting. We have a very light agenda the first meeting. It has been brought up that perhaps we should be moving this discussion to the first meeting, not exclusively, certainly getting through our new business, but then having the Woodmont, and that way we're not holding up people who definitely have, plans that need to be signed or conceptual discussions that are not as lengthy as these.
And that's something that the planning board as a group can decide. If it's basically the chairman's prerogative, if he wants to allow other things other than new plans at the first meeting of the month, he certainly can do that. The caution I had a few months ago when this was originally brought up was to solely dedicate the first meeting for Woodmont and move new plans to the second meeting of the month. That runs into some issues in terms of our public hearing notice for deadlines for when things have to be submitted for the month following.
Right.
So there was concern on my part that we don't push everything to the second meeting, because that could run into issues in terms of making sure that applicants have time in the event their projects are continued out to the next month to make sure they have sufficient time to complete their revisions and do their additional study.
So it's not our problem with making notices, it's allowing the people who are coming in enough time in between the two meetings.
It's the statutory requirements for public hearing notice. We have to have a minimum of basically 2 weeks public hearing notice in advance of a meeting. So if we have a planning board meeting the second Wednesday of the month, the deadline for that next meeting is going to be likely the next week if we're looking at scheduling for the second meeting of the month. So it really compresses the time frame that applicants would have. Whereas if they were on the first meeting and then continued, they'd have at least another week in there to complete their revisions to the plans.
So that's the point, though. It's not that we can't physically get notices out. It's the fact that we want to give applicants as much time as they can, that 2-week window. Well, right. If they need more than the 2-week window, they're going to take it.
Exactly.
But if they can get things done within that 2-week window, we want them to be able to do it to move their process along more quickly.
Exactly.
So that was the reason. All right, so we do have Woodmont. We did move forward last meeting. We got closer to some definitions as to what each of the different sections are going to be. There's still some more fine-tuning that has to be done there.
I think the last meeting was probably the most productive in terms of getting to the eventual land use plan that Woodmont's looking to move forward with. The fact that we went item by item down the list, they had the written descriptions of each of the districts that they're looking to do, I think really served well that there was some good back and forth between the board and the developer. I think there's probably going to be a little bit more tweaking on that, but ultimately I think there's going to be a comfort level that the planning board and the applicant receive, that they'll be able to move forward from that step, and then we can start looking at the real analysis of the project, that we start looking at the potential traffic impacts, the infrastructure, all of those other community impact related things that we really haven't been able to study yet, because until we know what the land use plan is going to roughly be, it's really not possible to review those impacts until we're at that point.
And when we're looking at, again, this 600-acre master plan compared to the 42 square mile master plan that we do every 10 years, right?
Roughly.
Roughly. And we take a year and a half on that huge master plan. We're being pushed by one set of folks to get a move on, get going, and we're wanting to do our due diligence to make sure that everything is great for our town, as good as it can be. So we're trying to, slow down the process a little bit. So we're kind of caught between the rock and the hard place here.
It is a bit of a catch-22. I think at this point moving forward, it's really up to the applicant in terms of when he wants to move to a formal application on this. If he gets to a comfort level where he feels that the board is comfortable with the land use, he could essentially choose to move forward with a formal application and then have the traffic, the infrastructure, and all that other review take place in the formal circumstance. I believe his intent is to do some of that at the conceptual level before he submits formally. So I would guess we're probably looking at least another 1 to 2 months on that minimum. We may be looking, again, it's really his prerogative now when he feels comfortable to move forward with an actual application.
Right. And while they are not the same entity, you did have some news about Market Basket, which is near that area.
The relocated Market Basket into the former Sears Essentials Marshall's building is looking to open for their grand opening on June 6th, assuming they're able to get all the final paving, striping, their as-built, and all that other final inspections from Public Works, Fire, and Building Department. But if all things move as planned, by the end of the first week of June, we will have the large 108,000 square foot Market Basket to replace the I think, overwhelmed 54,000 square foot store that's there today.
So really they're doubling their size.
They're essentially doubling.
Yeah.
And,
so are they going to, do you know if they have a plan to close Market Basket, the 54 square foot one, for a day, or
I don't know.
It'll be in the dead of the night where they move everything over?
If I recall the discussions during the planning board hearings, they felt comfortable they would be able to seamlessly transition from one store to the other without any significant closure.
Wow. Well, that'll be great. My husband loves Market Basket, so we'll see. I can't wait for his critique.
Going back to the first meeting on June 1st, we do have one site plan application. That's a change of use site plan located on Route 28 for Mr. Jeffrey Young. It's currently a duplex dwelling. He's looking to do an insurance office out of that site. He has received a variance in order to live in one half of the building and do the business in the other half. So this site plan will basically be to allow the change of use to the office on half of the building and to construct the small parking lot that would be associated with that. So it's a relatively simple site plan. It's one that's been through the variance process about a year or so ago, basically waiting them, making sure they get satisfied with their state permits. There is some issues. There is an area at the front of this property that's deeded for taking by New Hampshire DOT for the widening of Route 28 in that area associated with the I-93 project. So I think that was one of the reasons why it's taken a little bit of time to get to this point. But moving forward, it's a relatively low impact use, very minimal difference from the existing traffic for the site. So we're encouraged to see a new business locate here in town, and we think it'll be a nice fit for the area.
So is this near the park and ride that's on 28?
This is actually on if you're on the east side of 93, heading towards the town of Derry.
Okay.
So if I zoom back out to the first plan here, here's exit 5 here, and you're going towards Derry. It's past the Liberty Drive intersection, 2 houses down, and then this is the third house that'll be slated for the conversion. Great.
Okay, so we'll look forward to hearing that plan. And then we have the second meeting starts with Woodmont.
Starts with Woodmont. As I said, at this point, we're expecting there'll be some further discussion on the land use, perhaps a little bit of introductory discussion about the scope of the traffic impact analysis that we were looking for. Staff has had a couple of meetings with the developers' representatives about what the staff is going to be looking for and what we anticipate the planning board wants to see in terms of traffic impact analysis. It's not to the level of a site plan traffic study, but it's somewhere in between that and more of a corridor study like we do for our impact fee analysis. So we have an idea of what are the impacts of this development off-site, particularly to Route 102 and selected intersections. I think we identified about 8 or 9 to 10 different intersections, both within Londonderry and one in Derry, that we want them to take particular look at because of the traffic impact that could be coming from the overall full build-out of the site itself. So I expect we'll have some discussion about that, and I hope that it won't quite be the midnight time frame when we get to the next items on the agenda for this meeting. I think the bulk and the big legwork was last month, where we went through the initial presentation of each of those particular districts. And I think at this point it's more of a fine-tuning and getting a comfort level again between the board and the developer.
Right.
The second item we have is a conceptual discussion about a possible rezoning. Again, this is on Route 28 towards the town of Derry. This is actually a relatively interesting piece of property. As you can see from the map here, there's a little triangle that you see that actually has no frontage on Route 28 within Londonderry, but it's part of a lot that's located in Derry. In Derry, it's a commercially zoned piece of property. In Londonderry, it's residentially zoned.
Interesting.
He's looking to do some site plan work within the town of Derry. Some of that would be across the town line and into Londonderry. Because it's a residentially zoned piece in Londonderry, it's not allowed. So in order to move forward with this particular plan he has in Derry, he'd need to get some relief from the zoning and potentially rezone this to commercial so that he was able to do his business within the town of Derry and meet our requirements as well. It's a unique situation. We don't have a lot of these situations come up where there's a small portion. We've had several instances in the past where there's been developments in Derry or Hudson where part of it's within Londonderry, but
Right.
generally they've been zoned appropriately within Londonderry to allow that to take place with minimal to no planning board review here. In this particular case, where we're talking about improvements on a residentially zoned parcel, they need to either get the rezoning through Londonderry first, or if failing that, they'd need to go for a variance for the use within that parcel.
And what's surrounding him?
He is surrounded by the old furniture store, the old Wayside Furniture, the church is in that general area. I'm not
So it's not residentially used
It is not
land.
residentially used land. This is a very it's not medium density commercial area. Again, it's diagonally across the street from the Highwood Cold Storage Facility, the freezer warehouse, and the storage facility that's within the town of Derry, the mini warehouses there.
I know exactly where you are. Interesting.
So that's our first conceptual for the June 8th meeting. Our second one is actually one that was on the agenda last month, but there was no applicant's representative there at the late hour of the night. This is for L-Town Garage. They currently have a small automotive facility off of Mammoth Road in the North Village area, currently zoned commercial. They're surrounded by industrial property, and there's two larger parcels adjacent to them that they'd like to be able to expand their facility on. Given the commercial zoning, this type of use is not allowed in that zone, so they'll be coming to the planning board to consider potential industrial rezoning, which would be consistent with the zoning that's surrounding them. The Wallboard Supply building is the large building, and the lot adjacent to this as well. So again, this is in a pretty much commercial industrial type area. And this will be the second item for discussion.
Right. Is there, you told me there was Herald Square, though, there as
Nope,
well.
that's the next one.
Oh, that's the next one. Okay, next one.
Our third conceptual discussion, which may then lead right into a rezoning hearing, is for Heritage Truck and Auto. They currently have a facility in the same building where Herald Square is located, at the triangle where 128 and Route 28 come together. They're rapidly running out of space there, and they're interested in moving into a larger facility. The parcel they're looking at is on Jacksbridge Road and also has frontage on Clark Road. There's currently a residence on the property. This was actually conditionally rezoned by the town council several years ago in anticipation of an industrial development that never took place. So as it results, the lot itself is still zoned residential at this time. The concept plan they have presented to us is basically an 18,000 square foot facility. They were looking to rezone the property to industrial to accommodate the building itself. One little bit tricky part of this is that the surrounding zoning is industrial 1, and the particular use they're actually talking about is actually an industrial 2 use. But industrial 2 rezoning for the property doesn't really make sense in terms of if this particular user were to go away, there would be significantly different industrial uses that would be allowed here. So I believe the tack the applicant is going to be taking on this is to ask for industrial 1 rezoning and then go to the zoning board to allow a variance to allow for that particular use on the property, which is relatively consistent with the area. We have Harvey Windows, Coca-Cola, Penske Truck Rental across the street. So I think there's a fairly good chance they might be able to move their facility here with both the rezoning. And even if they don't get the rezoning, there's still the possibility of getting the variance from the zoning board. However, we think if it's industrial zoning, they have a better chance of getting the variance for that particular use on an industrially zoned piece of property.
So they're needing to expand because they have more trucks that they want to, are they leasing?
They are, I believe, leasing the space there, or the Heritage people own the building, and they just don't have enough space because of the other tenants within the building. From what I understand, they do a lot of specialty truck painting, things of that nature, and their business is booming because there really aren't any of that type of niche business anywhere within Londonderry or the surrounding communities. So he's found himself actually turning away business because he can't accommodate accommodated in his current facility. So it really makes sense for him to look for a standalone facility where he can have all of his use within the one building.
Well, it's nice that he's looking within Londonderry.
Within Londonderry, absolutely.
We appreciate that. So anything else on the agenda?
That covers us for June. Hopefully we again have a productive meeting with Woodmont, hopefully not as long and as late, but I think we're really starting to make some progress there, and I think once we get into the real review and analysis of the impacts, that's really where community input's going to be most key.
And we still may look at, I'm not sure how the economy is going to affect the first meeting of the month, whether we're going to be seeing more things coming in the first meeting, but we still may look at just putting them in, you know, because really starting the meeting at, starting them at 7 and not finishing a meeting until midnight when the other two things that we spoke about were, what, 45 minutes at tops?
Yeah, it was about 40 minutes or so on the subdivision, and then about 20 on the conceptual.
On the poor chickens.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I did appreciate everyone staying for all of that, you know, that time, and we felt that we did our due diligence to those two entities as well. So anyway, that's our agenda for June. We hope that you'll tune in or come to our meeting. Remember, if you do want to speak about Woodmont, you may go on Thursday evenings and Saturday mornings. They are still having, you know, workshop sessions there where you can come in and look at their conceptuals and give your opinions, and they'll answer any questions that you might have. Certainly come to the planning board. We allow public input, public questions, and, you know, we look forward to seeing you. Tim, thank you very much. And we'll see you in July. This has been Mary Wing Soares and Tim Thompson for Agenda Item.